Washington mornings on the Mall. 105.9 FM. And AM 630. WMAL.
737 on WMAL, where Washington comes to talk. I'm Brian Wilson. He's Brian Neiman. We are joined on the phone line by our good friend KT McFarland, a Fox News national security analyst and host of FoxNews.com's DefCon 3 show, which you can see this afternoon at 2 o'clock on Fox. It's live.foxnews.com. Hello, KT. How are you?
Good morning, boys. How you doing?
Doing well. I want to start off by talking about Syria. Yesterday, Western nations, including the United States, expelled Syrian diplomats. There has been talk in military circles about whether or not the United States should enter into the fray in Syria. This, of course, after 108 people are massacred, most of them women and children. Should the United States military get involved?
No, there's no military option. But there are other options. There's no military option. Why? Because first, there's no Syrian army. There are no Syrian rebels. The Syrian army Assad's army has had no defections. So there's no opportunity to build on that defected army, to send them military equipment. There's nothing there to build on. Two, they've got really powerful friends in the region, and that's Iran, and most importantly in this case, Russia. And those countries will block any international coalition, any UN action, et cetera, et cetera. But the third thing is we don't have the military bandwidth. We saw with Libya, which took much longer than anyone thought, and which really was a U.S. military operation, that our NATO allies couldn't pony up. And that was when times were good. Now times are economically bad in Europe. There's no way to get a coalition, particularly one that's based on NATO, to get involved. And anyway, a no-fly zone doesn't matter. The Syrian military are going house to house in tanks, and they're, butchering, slaughtering children. This is not going to be something where you do a military action unless it's anything other than an invasion. Nobody has a stomach for that. But I do think there's an option.
Okay. So what is the options?
Okay, I'm a Cold Warrior. I've been bred on the notion that the Russians are the bad guys. They're the heart of the evil empire. I'm no friend of Russia, but I'm a pragmatist. And right now, the greatest military threat to the United States is a nuclear Iran. Now, how does all this figure in? It's because if you could go to Russia and flip Syria on the Middle East chessboard and take it out of the pro-Iranian camp, you really affect Iran's ability to do what it wants to do. How would you do that? I would get on a plane to Russia or on the phone to Russia and say, look, we've had our differences. I know that you Putin, newly elected. I've trashed you before, but I want to let you know that your position in Syria, in the Middle East, won't change if there's regime change. In other words, Russia needs Syria. It's its only toehold in the Middle East. Russia's been trying to get back into the Middle East game since my boss, Henry Kissinger, did the first Middle East peace negotiations in the middle 1970s, which kind of edged Russia out of the Middle East. Russia is only an ally with Syria. Russia has a port in Syria. Russia sells military equipment to Syria. Russia doesn't necessarily care about the Assad family. It just cares about its relationship with Syria and its relationship in the greater Middle East. If there is some way that diplomatically Russia, with our concurrence agreement, even let Russia take the lead role, can get Assad out of Syria, stop the butcher, get a new regime that's a pro-Russian regime, just like this one is, we don't lose anything. It still was a pro-Russian regime. It remains a pro-Russian regime. But what it might do is flip it out of the pro-Iranian camp. Right now, that's the most important thing.
So how do you do that? I mean, I know that things have been promised to Russia. If there's an election and President Obama wins again, they're going to want other things, perhaps defense, missile shield.
Right now, Russia, here's the thing. Putin's been reelected. He's the once and future king. He has brought Russia back from the brink of poverty and disaster and chaos, and he's the guy who really rebuilt the new Russia. But right now, what is he? Well, he's not got to be thinking about his legacy. Does Russia really want to be the country that's supporting Syrian butchers who are stabbing children and killing them? No, it doesn't really want that. But what it does want is its connection with Syria. If Russia can take a big role in the region and be the peacemakers and get on the world stage again as somebody the world really respects, I think that's worth something to the Russians. They've always it's a country that throughout its history has really cared about its sense of what does the world think of us? Are we a big player? Did we get the respect we want? It's like a Rodney Dangerfield thing.
Yeah.
And so if the United States, and I don't think there's anyone in this administration who's capable of thinking strategically that way, but get a Henry Kissinger and go to the Russians and say, okay, you can still have Syria, but it's got to be in a Syria that stops murdering and butchering children. And by the way, you don't really want a pro-Iranian Syria because at the end of the day, that's as much of a threat to you as to anybody.
But you don't think Russia would want something more than just that?
I'd be willing to. Look, Obama's giving it all away anyway with getting nothing in return. That would be a good trade.
All right, well, I mean, the way you made it out, it seems like it would be a good trade. I'm not just sure that
look,
Russia
I think it's a
would
10% chance. But there's no military option there that has any real credibility.
Well, here's what Romney said the other day. He said that he was calling on the U.S. to work with partners to organize and arm Syrian opposition groups so they can defend themselves. That's not going to happen, is it?
Well, that's a different thing than sending in the Marines. That's talking about letting Turkey, other countries in the region take the lead, nurture and create a rebel opposition group that we would contribute military equipment to. That doesn't mean send in the Marines. Yeah, I think Romney's probably got it right, but at the same time, I would try this second. You always want to get a second opinion. If somebody says you got cancer, you don't just want to go to one doctor who says, here's the conclusion. Right. You want to get a second opinion. I would try that route using our covert special forces, which I don't believe we're using in the region. I would also use our relationships, which, by the way, President Obama has not had good relations with any of those countries in the region, with the Gulf Council or with Turkey. I would go and improve those relationships and let Turkey take the lead, take the countries in the lead, in the region in the lead, and then supply whatever we can in an assistance thing, lead from behind. But at the same time, I'd get on the phone with Russia and say, look, could you take the lead here,
right,
and broker and negotiate an arrangement whereby the Assad family leaves, stops the killing, I don't know, goes and gets a vacation dacha and on the Black Sea. And there's a new regime there that is not a pro-Iranian regime, is not a bunch of butchers.
You never know what you're going to get, and that's.
You don't know. I would try other options.
Yeah, because what we have now is not so hot.
But here, let me ask you that, because you never know what you're getting in Egypt. It seems to me that the choice is between a Muslim Brotherhood candidate and a former Mubarak guy candidate. Mm-hmm. We're going to side with the former Mubarak guy, right? That's the best thing for the United States.
Yeah, but here's the real problem with Syria. It doesn't really matter, I think, who's elected now, because what are they? It matters, yeah, but in the greater scheme of things, what Egypt faces is an economic and food crisis by the end of the year. Russia is the world's second largest importer of wheat. If it can't import wheat, its people starve. It doesn't have any. It's running out of money to pay for that imported wheat. Tourism is completely off. That was a major source of revenue. No companies are investing in Egypt because it's so chaotic. They don't know what will happen to their investment, and rich Egyptians are getting the money out. So Egypt is going to face a situation by the end of the year where it's going to run out of food. Whoever is president, whether it's the Muslim Brotherhood guy, whether it's the pro-Mubarak guy, whether it's some other guy,
right,
that person is going to get blamed for people starving. People are going to go back out into the streets, and that's what I fear almost most of all, is a chaotic situation where you have groups like Al-Qaeda and radical Islamist groups, not causing the problem, but seeing chaos and running in to take advantage of it.
All right, KT. Great to have you on as always. We appreciate it.